I don't want to interfere with an FBI investigation.
There's nobody that wants to get rid of bad cops more than I do.
Were you aware of LASD changing Mr. Brown's name?
No.
We still didn't know how high up this whole thing went.
I would not have subjected the FBI to me saying I don't trust them. We have too much to do than put prisoners who are at risk in a position where they are trusted more than I am.
Okay.
I am not going to accept that.
I got mine in 25 years ago. When I got mine, the Vikings were like, there was no scandal. There was no belief that people who had tattoos were, up to no good. I was a kid, I always wanted a tattoo. I never had a real good reason.
I'm just curious, why did he pick the Vikings as a...
I have no idea. It was picked long before I got there.
An FBI agent was asking Paul Tanaka about the Viking tattoo on his calf. He had gotten it in the late 1980s when he was a sheriff's sergeant in South LA. Now, in November 2012, he was the department's much-feared number 2 man with plausible ambitions to be the next sheriff.
Then all of a sudden it became criminal to have a Viking tattoo. When a reporter asked me that, I said, shit, if I would have known you guys were going to be all consternated over a Viking, I would have got Mickey Mouse,
I would advise against a Mickey Mouse tattoo,
The tattoo on Tanaka's calf denoted membership in a group of hard-charging deputies known as the Lynwood Vikings. Other deputy cliques with names like the Pirates, the Rattlesnakes, the Cavemen, the Regulators, and the Reapers had their own tattoos. Some included the number 998, code for an officer-involved shooting. Depending on who you asked, these cliques were menacing deputy gangs or benevolent social clubs united by the shared experience of patrolling some of LA County's most dangerous streets. The most notorious of these groups was the Lynwood Vikings, described by a federal judge in the 1990s as a neo-Nazi gang. The county had paid out $7.5 million to settle lawsuits alleging abuse by some members. Paul Tanaka described the Vikings as an innocent station mascot. He could not even recall where he got his tattoo.
If you said, I'll give you $5 million in cash today, tax-free, I would lose it. I wouldn't be able to. I have no idea.
So you have no clue?
I have no clue.
Tanaka's tattoo broke no law, but to the FBI, it was emblematic of his fraught history at the sheriff's department and his resistance to acknowledging its ugly side. Increasingly, the Fed saw Tanaka as the figure who had done more than anyone to create the culture at the LA County jails. Sheriff Lee Baca was the public face of the country's largest sheriff's department, a skilled, tireless politician who shuttled endlessly between community events, shaking hands, posing for photos, working crowds. He portrayed himself as a reformer. But it was under Sheriff Paul Tanaka that he had put in charge of running the agency's day-to-day operations, like the jails. Tanaka had a flintier temperament and a decidedly more old-school policing philosophy. Now, the feds wanted to know how much Tanaka knew about the department's effort to crush an FBI probe into the jails the year before, and who had sent 2 sergeants to threaten Agent Leah Marks with arrest. Marks herself was in the room that day, asking Tanaka questions.
We really do appreciate you coming in and not the greatest of circumstances.
In this recording, you can hear some of the qualities that made her a good interviewer. The former social worker whose non-combative, almost casual approach had been so effective in getting witnesses to talk.
I mean, in all honesty, we are just talking, right?
Okay.
We're just talking. This isn't grand jury. This isn't.
I
we're
understand.
just so. It's.
We're Just Talking has the ring of water cooler chit-chat. But of course, Tanaka must have known how dangerous this setting was for him. It's a crime to lie to a federal agent. The room was full of feds, and they wanted to know, had he been carrying out Sheriff Lee Baca's orders? Had he been acting on his own? Why, after all, had the sheriff appointed him second in command?
How come you think he did that?
He's told us very publicly to a lot of folks is, I have promoted Paul Tanaka all these years is because he does exactly what I ask him to do.
From the Los Angeles Times, this is Pandora's Box, the fall of LA's sheriff. I'm Christopher Goffard. This is episode 5, The Generals. Under Sheriff Paul Tanaka had a reputation as a hard man with small regard for whether he was liked. Speaking to the FBI, he portrayed his boss, Lee Baca, as a man who craved harmony and approval and affection, even at the expense of the sheriff's department itself.
If there are 10 people in the room, he wants all 10 to consider him a friend. No conflict.
Mm-hmm.
He and I have had some very animated discussions about this, but at the end of the day,
Right.
he's the boss.
It's not your call.
Tanaka had told his cops to work in what he called the gray area. Critics said this encouraged rogue activity, and the remark had dogged him no less than his Viking tattoo.
And I realize now, of course, in retrospect, gray is a bad color to use in police work. It was not in the traditional sense of what people think the gray area is the dark area. It's like right outside the line. Because I always made it clear, you cross the line, you're gone.
2 hours into the interview, Leah Marks brought up her plan to put a cell phone in the hands of her inmate informant Anthony Brown. And it was at this point that Tanaka seemed to realize that she was the very agent his sergeants had threatened with arrest. For a few seconds, he was at a loss for words.
You're the person. Yeah,
I'm.
took me what? Took me a couple hours.
I am the person.
I will tell you so let me start from.
I was going to say, I'd rather you just kind of lay it out there for us.
Tanaka said that the sheriff had been furious to learn that the FBI had smuggled a cell phone to an inmate without his permission or cooperation.
I just remember him being mad. A lot of colorful language, just mad. And you find out that effing phone and you get that phone, you hold on to that phone, and I don't want it to leave our custody. He wanted that inmate sequestered and interviewed. In his words, I want to know everything that's on that phone.
By Tanaka's account, the sheriff had seemed in total disbelief that the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office would sanction putting a phone in the hands of a career criminal. The agencies were supposed to be his law enforcement partners. It had to be a rogue agent.
He then says, and I want you to find out who brought that phone in, and I want you to work up a case on that person, meaning
The rogue agent.
The rogue agent.
rogue agent. Yeah.
You.
Got it. Okay. So it was the sheriff that ordered me to be.
These guys were trying to put together a case, and nobody was comfortable, right? I mean, nobody's comfortable about any of this. We're operating in not a very nice area here, and I did not want this out. We didn't want it out, and we did have to brief the sheriff on all this because we were marching to his tune. I mean, it was just very, very uncomfortable.
The sheriff's department had surveilled Marks, but Tanaka denied sending the sergeants to confront her outside her apartment.
So you didn't
No.
direct them to come and inform me that I was going to be arrested the next day?
No.
Okay.
Tanaka also professed ignorance about who had ordered Anthony Brown's name to be altered in the jail computers so it looked like he didn't exist.
Would you have given such orders?
I don't know. I don't know. I did not give the order.
Did you ever give an instruction to have this inmate's name changed?
No.
Who was leading the charge to, I guess, watching him constantly and changing his name and doing all that sort of stuff? Who was more in charge of that?
I don't know.
Nor did Tanaka recall the federal writ to produce Anthony Brown that had been ignored.
I cannot see how you cannot remember.
Oh, no. Yeah, but I don't remember.
Now, when Agent Marks the rogue agent was being investigated.
Can we put rogue in quotes, please? Because,
In retrospect, now I think I would have taken a firmer stance and said, wait a minute, before we start trying to question another agency's motivations, always sit down with the head guy and have a conversation. But then it's Monday morning, right? I'm hoping that over time, you guys will regain the confidence in our organization. There's nobody that wants to get rid of bad cops more than I do, more than we do.
4 months after this interview, Tanaka stepped down to spend more time with his family, he said. Sheriff Baca had initially stood by him. He was considered his protege, heir apparent to the 17,000-person department. But Tanaka had become a flashpoint for criticism as the inmate abuse probe entered its 5th year. The timing of his resignation was curious, since the following month, April 2013, Baca himself appeared at a downtown Los Angeles law office to face the Fed's questions. Is it possible that Baca had forced Tanaka out in hopes that it would relieve pressure on him as the day of questioning loomed? The Feds had been building their cases strategically, working their way up the chain of command, but holding off on indictments against the top brass until they learned all they could. Finally, they had reached the top. Lee Baca had no legal obligation to sit down with the Feds, so they had to persuade him that it was in his interest.
We made that decision early on that if we had charged the case before we talked to him, and they saw this as us building the case up to him potentially, that he was going to be very unlikely to talk to us.
This is Brandon Fox, the federal prosecutor in charge of the case.
We still didn't know how high up this whole thing went.
Sheriff Lee Baca would not be an easy man to pin down. He was about to take a seat in a downtown LA conference room for a high-stakes interview with federal authorities, a setting in which any lies he told could be considered crimes. Baca was known for his elliptical way of talking. His speech was full of well-thumbed rhetoric and stock phrases he had been trotting out reflexively during his many years in office. His sentences traveled winding paths through vague precincts to fog-filled destinations. Prosecutor Brandon Fox had studied Baca's public appearances to get a sense of what he was in for.
We'd all done our homework. We all knew what kind of an interview he would be.
I asked Fox what he hoped to get out of Baca during the interview.
Was this just a situation where deputies, sergeants, potentially lieutenants were acting on their own, or was there some larger conspiracy going on involving higher-ranking people? We didn't know the answer to that.
During the interview, Baca touted his achievements as a reformer. He spoke about the thousands of inmates who were getting an education in his jails, thanks to programs he had established. And he gave some insight into the dynamics of the institution.
The nature of the culture in the jail, it's us versus them. They're the enemy and we're the ones that are good guys. Now that can get taken to an extreme. And so in order to change that, you have to put them responsible for the education of these inmates, because that truly is what a jail should do.
Okay.
When it comes to the small percent of people who want to believe that inmates aren't worth redemption. I believe they are. No one is a greater believer in inmate rights than I am.
Yet when FBI agent Leah Marks was probing inmate abuse at the jails, his deputies had surveilled her and threatened her with arrest. Baca's answers to Fox's questions were frequently long-winded and evasive, full of long pauses, muddled and incoherent.
If we had better communication, we would have had a different outcome.
I guess I still didn't get an answer to that question.
Listening to this interview, it's hard to tell whether Baca is a man in cognitive decline or a man using his age and inarticulateness as a shield. Again and again, he denied having advanced knowledge of what his department had done, from kicking FBI agents out of an interview room, to making the informant disappear, to ignoring a federal writ to produce him.
I don't get into operational matters. I have 17,000 employees. I have 23 sheriff stations and huge contracts, and I have to rely on the people that I have in the intermediate managers.
What about the sergeants who threatened Agent Liam Marks with arrest? Baca claimed he had not been in the loop.
Once Leah was threatened with an arrest, it went too far.
Okay,
On the sheriff's department side, it went too far. And if she was sitting right here, I would apologize to her.
Prosecutors confronted him with the angry letter he had written to the U.S. attorney complaining about the FBI's probe of his jails, which he called, quote, illegal, unethical, and irresponsible. He had threatened to withdraw his deputies from joint task forces they were working with the feds.
See, let me explain this anger business. I don't get really angry. I get more tactical, all right? And anger is a part of it, but it's not the overriding part of it.
The prosecutor compared Baca's tactics to moves in a chess match. Baca agreed on the metaphor.
I wanted a full and clear understanding that we can't afford to have a fight between two agencies. I didn't start this fight, okay?
When you said just there you didn't start this fight, who started the fight?
Whoever decided to do all this and say that you can't trust the sheriff even. I will fight with any level of government that thinks that they can just do anything they want and never even have to explain it. And then if I were told about this, I would be on your side. You would have my green light to do whatever you want to do as an agency.
The FBI had not asked his permission to infiltrate his jails because it had not trusted him. But Baca seemed to find this fact intolerable, if not incomprehensible. He seemed personally hurt by it.
I know if it were reversed, I would not have subjected the FBI to me saying I don't trust them. That is unacceptable to me.
Okay.
We have too much to do. We have too much to do than put prisoners who are at risk in a position where they are trusted more than I am.
Okay.
I am not going to accept that. And I don't want to interfere with an FBI investigation. I have enough knuckleheads of my own that I've been able to discover that should be out of the system.
Baca admitted he had been resentful about the smuggled phone. He inveighed against federal law enforcement overreach and pointed to Operation Fast and Furious, a hideously bungled gun-running investigation in which the ATF allowed criminals to buy guns in an attempt to track them, and then lost many of the guns, including 2 that were found at the shooting of a border agent.
I understand that you had to do what you had to do, but don't believe for 1 minute that it isn't fraught with risk, because it is. You don't ever want to lose a phone in the jail, and that's what I'm saying to you. There's no evidence of a malicious intent on my part to undermine the mission of the FBI. You want to catch all the crooked deputies I have? In fact, it's helpful because I don't have enough budget to do it all myself.
For Sheriff Baca, this interview represented the culmination of a long series of misjudgments and self-inflicted wounds. As prosecutors saw it, his narrative had been a web of falsehoods, and they believed they could prove it.
In my opinion, your sheriff's department is the greatest law enforcement agency in the world. I want to thank the men and women. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that we love the people of this county.
In January 2014, LA County Sheriff Lee Baca stood in uniform at a podium outside the department's Monterey Park headquarters, frequently fighting emotion. He had been sheriff for 15 years, and had worked at the department for nearly half a century. He was a towering figure in law enforcement, sometimes called the Teflon Sheriff for his ability to survive scandal. He had looked untouchable. He was so popular that he had run unopposed at the last election, his fourth.
And to the people of the county, I extend my deepest gratitude for you allowing me to serve you for the past 48 years. It has been a true dream come true to meet so many incredible people of all races, all religions, all nationalities, and all status.
Baca had once told the ACLU, quote, "I will never ever resign. I intend to be sheriff as long as I live." But the previous month, federal prosecutors had announced a wave of indictments against some of his employees, reaching all the way to 2 of his lieutenants. And his former second-in-command, Paul Tanaka, was gearing up to run against him in that year's election. Baca said he wanted to avoid a race that would bitterly divide the agency.
At the same time that I was elected to 4 terms, I will go out on my terms. I'm not going to seek re-election for a 5th term as sheriff, and I will retire at the end of this month.
With his voice breaking, Baca concluded by reciting the creed he made all his deputies memorize. Behind him, some were silently mouthing it along with him.
As a leader in the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, I will commit myself to honor and perform my duty with respect for the dignity of all people, wisdom to apply common sense and fairness in all that I do, and the courage to stand against racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, and bigotry in all its forms.
Jack, let's start off with the significance of Baca stepping down.
This is my former colleague, Jack Leonard, who is covering the story.
Sure, this comes after a steady drumbeat of criticism for the last few years. What is really the critical factor that he's been facing is the jail scandal. This all started in 2011. There's been an ongoing federal investigation, as you pointed out, and now it's led to charges. And it's just a month later that he has come out and he's said that he's going to step down. We all thought that he was going to be fighting a really tough battle for re-election, but that his heart was in it. It seemed to be.
Can we take him on his word for why he said he wants to retire, or do you think that this might have something to do with the ongoing FBI investigation?
Well, we don't know. Obviously, all we know is what Sheriff Baca said. At this point, there's no indication that the feds are about to indict Baca or anyone else really close to him.
But the indictments were getting closer and closer to the top. And in May 2015, Baca's former number 2 man, Paul Tanaka, was indicted for conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Federal prosecutors portrayed him as the ringleader of the scheme to impede the FBI probe into jail abuses. According to the feds, he had approved the decision to send sergeants to Leah Marks' apartment to threaten her with arrest. His lawyers blamed Baca for the whole fiasco and said Tanaka had been out of the loop. But prosecutors produced logs showing the men had been together during critical periods. On the stand, Tanaka defended the Lynwood Vikings tattoo on his calf as an innocent mascot. Just because you say it's evil, he said, does not make it evil. The jury convicted Tanaka, and a judge gave him a 5-year prison term. Having worked their way methodically up the chain of command and prosecution after prosecution from deputy to sergeant, lieutenant to captain to undersheriff, the big question remained. Did the U.S. Attorney's Office have enough to prosecute Baca? There was still a chance to avoid a bruising trial, an option both sides seemed to favor, particularly after Baca's team revealed he was suffering from Alzheimer's disease. In February 2016, with Baca 2 years into retirement, prosecutors announced that he had agreed to plead guilty to making a false statement to the feds. He admitted that he had known his sergeants were going to confront Liam Marks. The deal was that he'd plead to one count, and the feds would ask for no more than a 6-month sentence. This appeared to bring the Baca case to a conclusion.
We knew it would be hard to have the jury find him guilty of obstruction of justice. At the time, in February of 2016, we felt the strongest case against him was the false statement case.
But the federal judge who had to approve the deal thought a 6-month term was too lenient, and so Baca withdrew his plea. He would challenge the charges at trial. If he lost, he could face 20 years' time. For a man in his 70s, that raised the possibility of dying in lockup. But the timing would turn out to be bad for the feds. Donald Trump had just defeated Hillary Clinton for the presidency, and many people in liberal Los Angeles, where the jury would be picked, blamed the FBI. The trial would pit a much-beloved local lawman, a man whose face had been familiar to Angelenos for decades, against a federal agency that had suddenly become deeply unpopular. On the next and final episode of Pandora's Box, the fall of LA's sheriff.
This was an existential threat to the sheriff's department, but it was of their own making because of what they did.
Pandora's Box, The Fall of LA's Sheriff was written and reported by me, your host, Christopher Goffard, for the Los Angeles Times. Mix and sound design by Emily Jankowski. Our editor is Steve Clow. Thanks to LA Times executive editor Terry Tang, president and COO Chris Argenteri, and LA Times Studios president Anna Magzanian. Special thanks to LA Times colleagues past and present who have reported on the Sheriff's Department and its scandals, including Robert Federecci, Jack Leonard, Joel Rubin, Cindy Chang, Ben Poston, Eileen Chekmedian, Connor Sheets, and Carrie Blakinger.